Hi, it's Crystal. Welcome back to my daily read. Today we're starting chapter 2 in part 1, and the character is a raven. The country he is in is Laos, and the time period is 1965 to 1975. But before I read, I just wanted to share a little bit of information about Raven. When I was originally developing his character, Raven he's a dude. And because he is a fighter pilot during the war, his language would have been colorful and he definitely would have been dropping F bombs left, right, and center. But as a writer, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't write the F word. And so you have a little bit of a censored version of Raven. And I would say to anyone who is writing, be true to your character, and if they would say the F word, then be brave and write it. If I was to do it again, um, Raven would say the F word. Okay, so here we go. The raven is an extremely clever and brave. It's a bird with the highest mental development, with more than 30 distinct calls. With its 4-foot wingspan and deadly 3-inch beak, it is magnificent and flies for the sheer delight of its mastery of the air, soaring to great heights and tumbling earthward in extraordinary displays of prowess. That is Christopher Robins, who wrote the novel called The Ravens, and his book was actually instrumental in my research. I dig into the pocket of my shirt. I don't need to look. My hand knows there's a pack of smokes waiting. I place a smoke between my lips. Oh, God, it feels good sitting there. I strike a match against a rock. The smell of sulfur greets my nostrils as I light up. I take a long, hard drag, hauling the smoke in until it fills my lungs in a thick fog. The sensation demands me to close my eyes and savor the moment. I oblige. Then reluctantly I release a smoky cloud that effortlessly evaporates in the air. I stand in the middle of the plain of jars, a 500 square mile diamond shaped region in northern Laos, with my back pressed against one of the hundreds of ancient stone jars that dot the landscape. I almost forget where I am amongst the rolling hills, high ridges, and grassy flatlands. But I can't forget. I'm in a country far, far away from my home in America. I'm a pilot in a war no one knows about, in a neutral country no one has ever heard of, let alone can pronounce the name of it. This tiny landlocked country borders Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, China, and Burma, making it strategically situated as well as vulnerable in the current political climate. Non communist countries, such as my own, are terrified of the threat of communism. They fear if Vietnam becomes communist, it will spread to the rest of Southeast Asia. My nation's agenda is to crush communism. It doesn't matter at what cost. Fear warrants crazed behavior. Our politicians feed fear to us and use it to justify their actions under the guise of liberation. From what I've witnessed, liberation means massacring the innocent and using the local hill tribe, my boys, and I affectionately call them Mao or Hmong, as they refer to among themselves, to carry out my country's agenda. My country has been secretly bombing Laos since 1964. Its target is the North Vietnamese forces along the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the communist Pathet Lao guerrillas who control the northern part of the country. We basically cut off the Viet Cong supply chain. No weapons, no food, no war. Makes sense, right? Evidence of our involvement is everywhere. A landscape once home to hill tribes and farmers is now littered with bomb craters. Of the bombs we drop, 30% do not blast upon impact. Christ, that means over 80 million bombs are buried waiting for an unknown farmer, a grazing cow, or an innocent child playing. Once arable land is now polluted, and the people of this region have resorted to hiding in caves. Others have fled south, desperate to escape the incessant bombs that rain from the sky. The Laotians suffer daily and will feel the impact of our liberating touch long after we abandon them. And we do abandon them. Christ, my best friend back home, spent more time debating about leaving his wife than my government did about pulling out of Laos. We use the Mao, and I feel nothing but shame. We use them to fight our war. It's true, the Mao didn't want the Vietnamese in their territory. It's true, they would have fought them if we were there or not. However, and it is a big however, our support created dependence, a confidence in the mighty US, our firepower, and our airplanes. And then we left. We buggered off and left them. By the time the war ends, Laos will have more bombs dropped on it than all of the bombs dropped on Nazi Germany and Japan together during World War II. It has been estimated that we flew close to 6,000 sorties. Oh, Christ, can you imagine that? That's a hell of a lot of airtime. According to my fearless leaders in 1969, we were flying high 300 times a day. Not bad for a neutral country. And were American efforts to stomp out communism victorious? No! Goddamn! In 1958, the Pathet Lao, who had the support of 1/3 of the Laotian population, but holy Christ, by 1973, after years of civil war, coups, counter coups, and US air attacks, the majority of the Laotians thought, the hell with the US supported Royal Lao government, and holy Christ, goddamn hooray to the communists. Yeah, key there word is majority. We actually lost the support of the local people in our fight against communism. Unbelievable. Where the Christ did we go wrong? There are a number of theories. I personally believe my government was tired and still stinging from the loss in Nam, so they opted to get the hell out of Southeast Asia. We hightailed it out, negotiating a half-assed peace treaty that left the Laos high and dry. Without our physical presence, the Laotians were even more vulnerable to the Viet Cong. In April of 1975, the Pathet Lao openly announced a future genocide program against the Mao. In December 1975, the monarchy was abolished and communism was established. Laos was proclaimed Lao People's Democratic Republic. I'm a Raven. I say this with great pride. I went to work with my head held high. I wore faded jeans, a Bermuda shirt, and cowboy boots. People looked at me and admired me because they knew I was brave, a skilled fighter pilot who was perhaps a little bit crazy. But you had to be to fly in war. And I was good. I knew I was good. Hell, if I wasn't good, I'd say so. Most of us Ravens had flown in Vietnam and despised the boundaries that prevented us from doing our job. How do you fight a war when the Viet Cong wasn't playing by the rules? I flew high in the sky with bullets ripping through the sides of my plane, waiting for permission to fire back. Rules of engagement, my ass. It was bullshit. When I first signed up for the Steve Canyon program, I had no idea what I was getting into. None of us did. There was such secrecy surrounding America's involvement in Laos that many wondered if it was an urban legend popularized by soldiers with too much time on their hands. As it turns out, there was no myth. After my stint in Vietnam, I went to a very real place and risked everything for the hill tribe people I grew to love. They are gentle people who believe everything has a spirit. Every tree, flower, blade of grass. Even a tough ass like me thinks that's pretty nice. Christ, the chances we took while flying were mind-blowing. We flew in fog so thick you couldn't tell your ass from your foot. We flew 7 days a week and spent more time in the air than we did on the ground getting shot at. Sometimes we went down and shit bricks until the search and rescue Jolly Green helicopter hauled our asses to safety. But flying in Laos was different. In Laos, there are no rules. I can blast the Viet Cong to bits without permission. In Laos, I was in control. More control than I ever had in Nam. Every day when I walked to my plane, stocked to the tits with ammunition, my gut jumped. I loved what I did. I believed in what I did. Hell, if it wasn't for us, this country would fall to the communists. The CIA trained the Miao people under the leadership of one of their own, Fang Pao, who armed them with weapons so they could fight the Vietnamese, inching further into their country. It was their blood that flooded the landscape. Strong, able bodied Mao fell until there was no men left, and recruits were children carrying weapons almost as tall as they were. Americans didn't fight on the ground alongside the Mao. My government was strict about that. The theory was if we confined our activities to the air, our presence in a neutral country, or shall I say, American involvement, could be ignored. Oh, Christ, the beauty of rationalization. I wondered how long it took the boys on the other side of the pond to come up with that one. In all Raven missions, we were accompanied by a backseater, a Mao whose knowledge of the terrain was invaluable to us. They validated targets for us by distinguishing between enemy and friendly areas. My backseater loved to fly as much as I did. His devotion to me makes me smile even to this day. When we were on the ground, he fussed over me like I was a rock star. Christ, I was as close to one over there as you could get. Man, he followed me around, hanging on every word I said. I adored that guy. But for the life of me, I couldn't pronounce his goddamn name. It was as if my tongue got stuck and then tripped every time I tried. I fumbled to the point that I just sounded stupid. And you can't have a Raven looking like an idiot. So I called him Backseater. Backseater was a wee guy who, when standing at full height, fit nicely under my armpit. I'd often stick him under my armpit and affectionately mess his hair up until it stood straight up. This always earned me one of his adoring fan grins. Around my neck, I wore a solid gold chain with a gold Buddha, blessed by monks from a Thai temple. I don't know what it was about that Buddha. I'm not Buddhist. Christ, I don't even think I'm much of anything anymore. But when I wore it, I felt safe. It was as if I was protected by a higher power. The monk who gave it to me said no harm would come if I wore my Buddha. So I always wore it. Before takeoff, I found myself rubbing Buddha as if to say, I need you now, so do your thing. I was not a superstitious guy, but I rubbed Buddha 9 times to the right and 5 times to the left before takeoff. When I was back safe on the ground, I did it again. It was my way of saying thanks. If I were home in America, the guys would have teased the shit out of me, but not here in Laos. I noticed some of the other pilots were wearing them too. Hey, in a job like ours, we took all the help we could get. There was something different about that morning, but I couldn't put my finger on it at the time. I woke after an evening of debauchery, only to discover the pounding in my head was in direct competition with the beating of my heart. I dragged my sorry ass out of bed in record time because I was due for takeoff in 15 minutes. There wasn't time to brush my teeth, so I swished some warm beer around my mouth and ran out to the airfield in rumpled clothing I had on from the night before. It was only when I reached for my Buddha before takeoff that I realized it wasn't around my neck. Christ! My hands desperately searched my clothing and the floor of the plane for my Buddha. Christ, Christ, Christ! What are you looking for? Backseater inquired. For Buddha, I responded. I watched the panic travel through Backseater's body until it spread the width of his face. Although not a practicing Buddhist, my animus compadre was a stickler for routine. We no can go. Backseater started to get out of the plane. Seeing his panic snapped me back to how unreasonably I was behaving. I'd never been superstitious, nor was I remotely religious. Who needs a stupid Buddha anyway? I retorted as I forcefully pushed Backseater down and determinedly sat back down myself. You mean no. I felt my present weaken in the presence of his tears and relented. It's okay, Backseater. You know I'm a good pilot. You best pilot, Backseater said in between sobs. You best pilot. His anxious tone couldn't hide the way he felt. It didn't matter how good I was. I didn't have my Buddha. I fired up the engine, ignoring the gnawing pit in my stomach. My fingers rubbed the place where Buddha should have been, 9 times to the right and 5 times to the left. Christ. We'll be back tomorrow to see what happens to Raven. Thank you.